Is the Conservation Commission meeting of Wednesday, July 28th, 2010. We'll go around the room and introduce ourselves.
I'm Jean Walker.
I'm Kimberly Peace, Chair.
Kim Ricard.
Nick Camposano.
Collis Adams.
Oh wait, do we have a quorum?
Yeah.
One,
Nick?
Two,
Nick?
three,
Is he
four.
Nick can vote?
Nick can vote.
I can, no.
No.
You can't vote? One,
Well,
two, three.
four's
Well,
a
still
quorum.
four,
Four's a
right?
quorum.
Four's a quorum. Alrighty.
Quorum.
Okay. Oh, here comes
Yes.
sailing in.
Wait for me?
Yeah, well, we had just decided to get started.
Okay.
So, you're ready. Okay. So we'll start off the night with Eric Mitchell, map 9, lot 33-7, 46 and 60, Cordis and Blackbriar Woods, 19 lot open space subdivision. Update us on the status of this, Mr. Mitchell.
Okay.
Ready, set, go. We did a site walk on July 18th, and there are notes. And your yield plan, what was the result of that out of the planning last week?
It was approved for 17 lots.
Approved for 17 lots, okay.
One down there, just in case somebody comes.
Do we have anything on these on our desk? Or just- No,
This
alrighty.
is a little bit more of an exhibit.
Okay.
The whole plan set,
I can,
all the drainage is
Oh,
now
alrighty.
complete.
Okay.
I have an extra.
Drowning in paper. Hey, Amy, how are you?
We were before the planning board last week. The yield plan was accepted at 17 units, but the actual engineering and plan review will not be heard until the first week in September. I'd like to give you an update on the plan. I know you had your site walk, and then we'd also expect to be back here next month.
Okay, so let's keep this brief.
The reason, the main thing I want to be here, I want to talk about our stormwater management with respect to the wetland buffers, the 100-foot and the outer 50-foot buffers. The plan that you have here, pavement is shown as to where we would have it. It is a town street. The areas that we are proposing for our stormwater management would be an area right off the beginning here. If you look at the tree symbols, or the tree line symbols, that's an area that has been cleared. I think some cordwood cutting was in there. It was a cordwood yard. So we propose to do a infiltration area there to take care of some of our stormwater. The other areas that we've selected is to do some in the middle of the circle, which would be raised, and the last one would be on lot 12, which would be a detention area there. We have initially, when we looked at this for the 19 lots, and these wetlands were not here, we had an area between these two hills here that we thought we could use. What we've elected to do here, instead of still going back in that same area, is to keep the major detention area outside of the 100-foot buffer completely, and all we'd have is a trail going out to the open space as a walking trail. The small wetland right here is less than 2,000 square feet, so there's not a buffer, but we can place the swale where the board could suggest. The areas that were within the outer 50-foot buffer is for the grading of the cul-de-sac here and the driveway coming into lot 12, which would also be part of the drainage easement, because we would pipe the water to here, as well as on the entrance coming in through here. We did have initially some drainage in through here, but we're going to pull it all to all come down into this area here. So we just have slopes to the road in here, and all the drainage would go to there. The other area is in the vicinity of lot 3. I know the board commission has commented on the lack of space there, and we know that that is tight. We expect to modify these lot lines to give that more room, but we'd like the board to consider whether or not relief can be granted in the outer 50 feet on lot 3 whereas in this one area, before you get to the lot, that's an area that's been excavated, and there is no, that would have to be regraded and reseeded into the buffer. And the area that we would be building between 3 and 4 is on the top of the hill. So we would be able to have, if we're allowed to go into the outer 50 feet, to have a cut slope coming down, so there would be no drainage from the houses going into the wetland. And that's different than having on these lots here, which continue to slope down, a situation where people would be adding more yard or doing things here, where that's a cut slope. People would not do anything beyond that because it's, they can see they can't just grow like moss and go more further and further into the setback. So I guess I'm here for comments. We do expect to have a function values analysis, which is being prepared now for some of the areas where we're in the buffers, and we're here to get your input tonight.
So you think someone's gonna buy a house with a 120-foot detention basin as the front yard? Lot 12? You're gonna put the house way back there and they're gonna drive by the detention basin?
Well, we have the alternatives we have is to put it out here in the outer 50-foot, but adjacent to other wetlands. So what we've elected to do is put an area where it's not in the buffer, but this lot itself being a longer driveway and an area out back, it has its benefits of being away from everybody else, but the drawback would be to have a pond on the side. If the board would rather have us place it out in here, we can do that. It's the same amount of effort for us, but we showed it this way for you to look at.
It seems large too. It's just for these 17 houses, it seems like a really large basin. You're gonna have to tree cut all that, right? It's just seems really large.
In our final design, it's more than a preliminary design, but we'll obviously try to reduce the amount we have. But right now, we're looking for areas where we can put it. We don't want to go to do final design to put it in areas that either the commission would be against, and we would not be able to get a reduction in the buffer from the planning board. So we are looking for input. We would prefer not to have it on a private lot. We prefer to have it in the buffer, but we think that this is one alternative that may be a better alternative than putting it out back into here.
Well, because if you put it way out there, you have to access it.
Right. You're absolutely right, and that's another reason why we looked at this. If we have to access it, you have to provide access for maintenance, and then we have what amounts to a gravel road going between the wetlands that go out in the back. So we said, well, if we access down the driveway that's there, perhaps overall that's better, even though it is a detriment to the actual lot.
Okay, Carlos?
Eric, what drainage is going to be directed to that detention basin? I don't see any closed drainage system on the...
That doesn't show here, but this would be piped.
Oh, there is a
from
closed drainage system?
Yes, it would be piped from the cul-de-sac over to that.
But is there closed drainage all the way along the road?
No, there is not.
So,
There is some drainage coming down through here, which would go into
Yep.
the basin here.
Yep.
There is no culverts or drainage in this area. That's the high point. But down where we get after the crest here and come down into here, we'd either be picking up from here and going into the side and then come over to here. We'd probably pick up some of the drainage here and try to do some treatment in the middle of the cul-de-sac during a low flow, and then the high flow would come across the road and out to the detention basin, whether it's here or over here.
I mean, I can't speak for the planning board, but I don't think they're going to support, at least they haven't in the past, detention basins that are that remote and that difficult to get to. They're just too far away. And if it was way out there, again, the same question, what drainage would it be accepting?
It would be all the drainage from the high side of the road here.
Yeah.
And this area is all going down. This is about 20 feet lower than where the cul-de-sac is.
No, I meant in the other location, the remote location.
Oh, through here?
Where on earth would that be taking drainage from?
It would be the same. It would have to be piped or swaled going out to this area.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Yeah. I mean, have you looked at alternatives for on-site management of stormwater, like rain gardens and those sorts of things, to try and cut down the size of the detention basin, or maybe even possibly eliminate the detention basin? Have you looked at?
I don't think we can eliminate it. We're gonna try to make it smaller because it isn't something that we want, and that's why we're looking at doing some, inside the circle. But there was also an area in through here, which is outside of the 100-foot buffer. But with the slope of the road, having access to the open space, we really can't fit it. We are gonna try to have this smaller areas to do our stormwater management as we can. We would greatly like to have this smaller, or have it fit in through here if we could. But right now, we have to show you what our initial plans are, and if we have to go back to the drawing board to do something, that's why we're here for input from the commission tonight.
Okay, I mean, I'd like to see some consideration given to on-site, smaller management spaces like rain gardens, to at least take care of the roofs, the driveways, the parking areas, and the individual lots, so we can eliminate all of that contribution.
Yeah, it just seems really big. So, I mean, I was just out I look at the one in Durango all the time, and it's just treeless and huge, eyesore. So, I also, we keep questioning Lot 3. I guess what you're saying is if you were able to fill that flat spot and get within the 50-foot, you'd angle this lot so that everything's shooting forward, not toward the back of the lot and the wetland. It just seems like there's really little space in that lot, and we've said this repeatedly. It just seems like and even when you look at the grading, especially when you look at Lot 4, I mean, we typically grant waivers for driveway access, not lot creation. So if you don't get a waiver of the 50-foot on lots 3 or 4, they're just going to be really very small area.
Well, our other alternative, even though it isn't something we prefer to do, is to straighten the road out through here to give some more area.
Yeah.
But as we do that, then these areas get smaller, and those go straight down to the wetland, whereas this area is in a cut. So we're not, we're here to feel out the commission as to what their gut feels are on these, but we do have some other options that we can do at this time.
I mean, we're looking to make recommendations to the planning board. I think we can certainly recommend that there be specific development plans submitted for each of the lots, and I think Eric's familiar with this. In fact, I think you've done that before.
We've agreed to give that to the
So I
planning
think,
board.
yeah, we ought to take a look at that, or have an opportunity to look at those, so we can see exactly how the house and driveway and everything's going to fit on each of these, especially the tighter lots.
Yeah, I believe you said that at planning, that the
We'll
next
have
plan
all
set
the
is
lots.
going to have the
Okay.
lots. Okay. Yeah.
But for us, we would start that right away, once we know that we have the road layout where it's going to be. But if the commission feels strongly about certain things on the plan and working within the buffer, so that we would have difficulty getting the planning board to agree to reduction in the buffer, placing all the houses in those areas would be a wasted effort. So we'd like to get it right the first time.
I believe the waiver says for access. Not sure we give a waiver for lot creation, because if it's too small to build in with the wetland setback, maybe it doesn't need to be a lot. That's other people. Anybody else?
If you might at least read the section on it, it is not specific to access. It says any relief in the area, the way it's written. And I just read it for what it says. Typically, it is for roadways. But actually, roadways are an exception. The crossing in through here, through the buffer and the wetland, does not require a special review. It's only working in the outer 50 feet, whatever that might entail. And obviously, we want to keep it to a minimum.
Thoughts? Anyone else?
Is this intended to show a trail to the open space?
Yes,
Eric? Is
that
what
was
is?
for you to see tonight.
Okay, I think we might want to look at realigning that, because the way it is now, it leads right out to an upland peninsula, which would require crossing of the wetland.
We would expect to have footbridges here that would be elevated
Okay.
above the wetland. And the actual location of the trail can actually be done on the ground, with the commission if you want.
Okay.
We are proposing public access. We are showing 3 parallel parking spots off the end of the cul-de-sac here. near the entrance, so that if the public did want to go there to walk, they'd have a place to park on the road.
Okay. Anyone else have any other comments?
I remember there was a little bit of talk that quote-unquote Preston Pond, is that considered a vernal pool? Because I know that had come up. Is it or is it not?
I don't believe it's a vernal pool,
Okay,
but it is, the pond is there, and we're trying to maintain the hydrology in it,
okay.
so it'll stay as a pond as often as the rainfall lets it.
Any other questions
Okay.
from us?
This area through here,
Yep.
which what you see in the dashed lines is the 50-foot setback,
Mhm.
and we don't have 100 feet between them, so we're 75 feet off. Does the commission consider this may be an appropriate place to do some stormwater management within the buffer there?
It looks like just about the only place you can stick it, really. So,
It's already been disturbed. It was a log landing or a
Yeah,
log yard
yeah.
of some sort.
yeah, I mean, it's been disturbed, and it's, you're hugging the buffers, but, as long as, it's all right.
It happens to be in the low area, not the lowest, because the wetland is lower, but it will capture what we need to collect for drainage.
And there's,
Yeah, I don't mind that.
and there's quite a bit of wetland right behind it, so that'll be adequate to hold a 100-year storm.
Yes, it'll be checked for the 100-year storm.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with it there.
Has there any analysis or any data on the flow, which way the water is flowing through the wetland system?
All of it flows towards Black Brook, but it goes off our property before it gets to Black Brook. I know it may be a little bit difficult in the small sketch here in the corner, but this wetland here is the same as this one. They all come down and continue to feed, but they go off-site right through here, with Black Brook being down here. So most of all of these do interconnect and go off-site. There's only, these are more isolated, so the flow from these go off-site, then goes into the brook. We don't have anything that goes directly in through there. But they're all interconnected, primarily going off-site. And if the board would, the commission would also like to discuss the disposition of the open space, I believe we indicated to the planning board that it would be our request that the town consider taking over the easement for ownership. We do not really want to put it into a homeowners association to have a what we consider an unnecessary layer, because the project itself, there's no other components that require the homeowners to be together. It's a public street. They'll have their own wells and septic systems. And we would like to have the best level of protection, and I think the commission may concur that the homeowners association is not necessarily the best it could be. And I believe the town, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, has either in the past accepted conservation easements, and the town will be the holder of the easement if the land was held by somebody else of a protective nature, or the commission or the town could own the land and someone else could have the easement, or the town could have it all. I'm not sure which way the town has come before, but it is not our desire whatsoever to have a homeowners association be involved, but it would be public access, and we would prefer to have a public entity or a quasi-public entity have ownership of the easement as well as the real estate.
Have you made any inroads of contacting any of these organizations?
I don't know if Keith has done more with Piscataqua, but we're also interested in the town's desire to take either. It's easier for us to work straight for the town, whether it's ownership or easement, and work in conjunction with Piscataqua if we need to.
I can let you know in the past, all the open space developments, they've all been owned by the homeowners, and there has been some where we have had a conservation easement on them, but the ownership was with the homeowners, and then when they broke out the lots, they all got a piece of the homeowners of the land owning it together, so it equaled to like making whatever the required acreage was for those lots. Like if it's agricultural, they'd meet 2 acres.
Yeah, and we have done that before, but I think if we, with a reread of the ordinance, it does allow you can do either way, but it does allow for the public to actually have ownership.
Yeah, and I think that although that's generally what has happened, that's not necessarily always what has happened. A good example is Juniper Drive, where there was part of that subdivision where the beaver pond is, that was actually deeded to the town.
It wasn't done in.
And while that may be true with the developments that have the small open space areas, this is a fairly significant, it's 126 acres. And I don't know how it relates to other open spaces, but this may be attractive to some land trust. I mean, I hear you say you'd prefer that we take it, but I prefer we don't take it. That we exhaust all their efforts to identify other groups are willing to take on the easement.
And there's a number of reasons for that. One is, I mean, from the commission's point of view, if you want real protection, you want to have a conservation land trust. You don't want it something that's subject to political winds, which can change at any given time. If you're making a commitment to the long term, it should be a real commitment. But the other thing, too, and then another aspect of it from the town's view, if it's a land trust holding the easement, then land trust assumes the stewardship responsibilities, and that's effort and responsibility that the town does not have to assume. And so that's also attractive to the, I would hope, attractive to all boards and commissions and so on in the town for that reason.
It's large enough that, I mean, someone might want it, you know, Civic or, you know.
Yeah, and you should look at the open space layer on our GIS and see where the other open spaces are and who holds those and where, how this fits and is there connectivity
Well, we've looked at that, and
on this one?
yes.
Yeah.
And I have been in conversations in the past with the PLC when this was first being looked at. The PLC was interested in taking the easement. They made the decision, well, this has to go through the town first. The town has to decide where it's going. It wasn't really appropriate for them to inject themselves, earlier on. The primary concern that PLC had was, well, if this one did go to a homeowners association, then that's a problem for them. They don't want to deal with an association. They want to deal with a single entity, either a governmental entity or a private entity.
Has the town taken fee ownership to open space and have someone else do the management? Has that happened in the past? Or in this case, if the town was deeded the open space as far as fee ownership, but then another entity would actually own the easement and be responsible for the whatever needs to be done for maintenance or keep up with the easement.
That has not been done in the past, to my knowledge. I mean, it's been easements to the town or whatnot, but we haven't had I can't think of a single occurrence before where the fee interest went to the town and the easement to another organization, but certainly this is a property that's very appropriate. This is very different from any previous, projects in the past. It's not really one that you could compare to.
And along with that, who would be maintaining the swale? If it's, is it just going to be, I mean, if you have it on this lot, who's going to be responsible? To me, that would kind of be a homeowners association responsibility too.
Well, that's something we'd have to talk to the planning board about, but it's intended to be part of the public improvement for the road. So we would prefer the town to have it, and I've got to understand the town's concern to have it closer to the road so when they do maintain it. But that's something we're going to have to work through. It's intended to be a public improvement.
David and I have walked hours on this property, and it's absolutely beautiful walking through that area. It's really worth trying to keep it open for the residents to enjoy also, rather than being restricted to homeowners. It is really a beautiful piece of parcel of land to walk around.
I can tell you in early conversations with, I believe his name was Eric at PLC, the preference was for perhaps a town or some third entity to take the fee interest of the open space and have PLC granted an easement across it. There's a significant amount of apprehension, and it seems to be, we've experienced this in other towns recently, that land trusts as a whole are reluctant to hold easements across anything that's fee interest is owned by a homeowners association. It's not specific something policy-wise to PLC. It's a growing concern because they found the enforcement headaches and the enforcement costs that are involved when you have 17 individual homeowners that believe that that's my land, I own that, you can't tell me to do X, Y, and Z. The enforcement costs and the enforcement and protection abilities of the land trust is severely handicapped with it. So my early conversations with Eric, Member Neiman was correct. He kind of bounced me back to the planning perspective, said, geez, these are town approval issues, but in a perfect world, this is how we would like to see it. We've explored, as I mentioned, we've explored this with the Southeast Land Trust on an unrelated project in another town. And the question was asked, how do we tie the density of it, because it was used to fulfill the density of an open space subdivision. And the answer that came back to us from that town's council as well as our council is that it certainly could be covenanted that the open space was there to fulfill the density of the subdivision, even if the fee interest wasn't held by that association. We just don't want to tromp too far down the wrong path. My education with that experience last time was a very costly education that came back to town saying that's just not how we do it. And I just didn't want to find myself tens of thousands of dollars behind legal fees to get back to that's just not how we do it.
But I don't think our regulations tie the open space portion of the subdivision to a homeowner association, does it?
No, we looked at that and it doesn't. It just hasn't been done that way. And I was just stressing also concern with even if it goes to say we don't open it and it's some other trust, again, it's if the swale isn't on this lot and goes into the open space area, I know that's to me another issue. But you might want to talk to Megan.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you very much.
Take these back for you.
You want these back?
I'll take them back if you get one.
Don't give him my big plans.
Oh, no, sorry.
Are those yours?
Those are planning. I'll get in trouble.
Oh,
Keep
keep somebody
Just
borrow
assemble- just
those.
assemble sheet.
All righty.
These here, these larger ones? Yeah, those
Yeah,
are the main
Eric
ones.
wants the little ones, Patty wants the big ones.
And another one.
There we go. The big one.
You can give them back to his yield plan.
Okay.
No, that's yours. That's where you got mail.
Still,
Yep.
Okay,
Calling him back tomorrow to give them back.
Okay, okay, we're at the public discussion for Brookfield Investment Group and Norman Road LLC, map 5, lot 95-1 and 61-1, for proposed excavation site plan along Norman Road, Mass Road, Crestwood Lane, and Wallace Road. Andy, you gonna have a presentation?
You guys all have plans?
We do.
You guys gonna set? All right. Good evening, Matt Peterson with Woodland Design, here representing Brookfield Investment. Obviously, if you've been on this board long enough, you've probably seen this project in multiple different phases. We are moving forward we have been working with the town to try and develop, as I think most people know, maybe some recreation fields and stuff like that in the town. It went on the ballot this year, did not pass on the ballot. Brookfield has owned this for some time now, come to do a few different things. He really believes, I believe, some of the people we've been working with, that if we could ever get to this being a recreation area, it would be a great use in the downtown area. I think it would really fill in down here. So this is kind of a step to get to that point if we can. Obviously, on this piece of property, there's some substantial taxes every year and different things that have gone in and gone out of this project. There is an expense to building a flat area that fields can be on. This here would help out possibly at the end of the day that the town, if something did happen 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road, they would have a spot that they could do this. When I say 2, 3, 4 years down the road, right now my client's intent is to put it back on the ballot next year, see what goes next year. Put it on the ballot the following year, see what goes the following year. I think unless we decided something different a year from now, he's gone through multiple different things on this piece of property, from the multifamily to single families, and there's I think it's over 150 abutters, and there's a lot of opposition to doing a lot of different things. This use really seems to fit in. We talked about not needing an excavation permit. We met with Steve Griffin back in November, December of last year on the possibility of doing something like this that didn't need a permit. It's kind of gone back and forth that, hey, we went to the planning board and said, we'd really like you to do this with an excavation permit. We understand what you're trying to do. Now, if any of you, if you turn to sheet 1, just kind of gave you an overview of the site that's here. We have access out on Norton Road. There's an existing gravel road that kind of runs in the field back there and then kind of hits the tree line back here. This gravel road runs all the way back and into this big open sand pit. I'm not sure if you've been out there, but there's bonfires and kids are out there partying and doing all kinds of fun stuff on Ed's property right now. You can see the tree line that runs around the edge here, comes up around here, through there, the trees, it's all cleared up in there. Comes back around in here, comes back around in here. So majority of this area that we're talking about doing the excavation has already been excavated at one point. There's about 4 to 6 feet remaining that could be excavated to help level out the area and make it a flat area. We are proposing, as you can see on the next sheet that you had there, a little, this area is treed right now. We have a little in area here that we want to excavate that is treed. And we have a slight area in here that is treed that we want to excavate. But again, the majority of this site is already dirt, sand, basically, nice coarse sand that's out there. So if you turn to sheet 2 of 5. As I just said, you can see the tree line wraps pretty much around the area we're talking about. All the way up into here, that's all trees towards the wetlands. This is all open area in here. The tree line in here is right here, so this area here is treed. And then the tree line here comes around and back down here, so this area right in here is treed. So we're talking 2 areas that are treed that would be removed and added to that area. It's approximately 623,000 square feet, or it's approximately 6 to 8 feet in depth. There is a lot of information the planning board has asked for. There will be more details that you will get as we go forward with this project here. It needs an alteration and terrain permit from the state, which will show things of reclamation and the grading and where the drainage is going and all those types of stuff that we'll get into. There's a substantial cost to doing some of that stuff, so we've kind of walked slowly through this project with the planning board now to here. And then we found out that we need to go to zoning board last month, so we're in front of zoning board to deal with that. So again, we didn't want to spend a lot of upfront money to get to the point where we got everybody's input. Again, this piece has gone through a lot of different iterations, and people have some take on it that they'd like to give us. But the gist of it is just this area here that's in bold. As I said, I'm removing about 6 to 8 feet. I don't think I showed the access way. John Neville Excavation is the one that Brookfield is working with to do the gravel removal out here. I've been on site with them to talk about, as I said, this is the existing gravel road that's out there. You can see here it's a little wider. Those dotted lines are the width of it. But it's approximately 15 feet wide all the way in. What Mr. Neville has explained to me is that their trucks would just use this coming in and coming out. It doesn't need to be any wider. There's actually already culverts that are in different locations throughout that gravel path that's there. And if one truck's coming in, it radios that, hey, truck 1 is coming in, truck 2, hold on before you come out. I think very similar to what the ice road truckers do up in Alaska, if anybody watches that show. So the gravel road is there, the excavation area is there, is pretty much there, what we've already cut out for the trees, and our access would be out onto Norman Road. And I don't want to, I kind of showed a preliminary what we were thinking about, but it seems to get everybody worked up every time I flip to that sheet lately, so I'll keep that one for you guys to look at, but that's what, some conceptual soccer fields and baseball fields and recreation areas and stuff like that. That would be the ultimate goal at the end of the day. There's really nothing else that just excavating this area is creating. I mean, it's not like we're creating a pad for subdivisions or multifamilies and that type of stuff. It's not, that's not what this is trying to create. So that's our presentation. I think you guys have looked at this 1 month before, but we'd like to get your feedback, what you're looking for. We'll probably end up doing a site walk with the planning board. I don't think we scheduled that because we had to get through the zoning board first. So, at that point, you guys may have a little bit more comments, but I know some of you had comments at planning board, so we'd like to get it all in, take our notes, and then we'll come back with hopefully everything addressed. That's it.
I think the most substantial comment was that the wetlands haven't been delineated or checked in a while.
Wetlands mapping 2002 update. This was comments from the planning board that I had. The question that we had for the board back then, I think most people would agree, I hope. We understand the mapping of where we're looking to impact. I think that makes a good sense, but I mean, I would hope that we wouldn't have to remap this stuff where it was done in 2002. This isn't, we just didn't make it up from GIS. It's been mapped. We're not affecting any areas in there. We'd like to keep the remapping to, where we're obviously impacting, if that's okay with the board. But that was something planning board also had questions on, so.
I don't have a problem with that. Because if you end up doing fields, you'll have to go out back and check those at that point, so.
Yeah, I would recommend within, all wetlands within 100 feet of the proposed
Okay.
work area, just to make sure we don't.
That sounds good. I think that was our main concern. We just, you know, the wetlands out there, as you know, are extensive, and there are culverts, but I guess it's certainly a Megan issue, but whether the culverts are appropriately sized, because I know the existing road tends to flood over quite a bit. You know, it can be really swampy out there, depending on where you are. I don't know the intent to build up this road any.
No, it's pretty much gonna
No.
be the way it is out there. I mean, what Neville's saying, I mean, the amount of material we're talking about, this is not a major gravel operation. This is probably a 2-year process. If the economy completely craps out again, it might take 4 years, but there's not a ton of material to remove out of here, is what John Neville is saying. As I said, 6 to 8 feet, if you look at most gravel operations, they're in operation for 20 years with lots and lots of material. This was already excavated at one point, that road was used for it. So, no, John is telling me, and again, you'll see the sidewalk, the quality that it's in. I think one culvert was crushed when we were walking, and I forget, and I said, John, you have to do something there, honey, but the majority of it's already in.
Collis.
And is the actual excavation going to respect the wetlands that are within, you show the excavation area, but there are some wetlands within here, especially the over-excavated pond
That's
and
something
the
the planning,
outlet stream from it?
the planning board talked about that, and we needed to go out there and take a look at that,
Okay.
from a wetland scientist standpoint on what that over-excavation was. And that would have to be modification. I would have to, if that's, needs to stay, it needs to stay. But again, that was a dug backhoe trench. So we may want to.
I mean, whatever its functions and values are, if it's worth, you know, dancing around or not. It just seems like some of these, you're walking, wow, something like echoey. Seems like some of them, it's really echoey. You're right at the edge, and so if you're going like down 6 to 8 feet, I mean, we don't want to turn this into a huge lake.
Nope, actually, we're not gonna go right here. This is raised up from the wetland 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 feet.
Okay.
So again, we're not gonna go below the wetland, have it drain back in and create the pond that's in there now. I mean, we're gonna have, when we do the grading, we're gonna be looking at what the final kind of concept we were thinking about, the fields and stuff, and we wanna get one elevation that then the town, or anybody could come in and change them later. So no, we wouldn't, we'll take that in consideration. This all climbs on this area here, so.
Anyone else?
Did you want to site walk this?
I guess we'd be welcome, we'd be invited whenever planning is gonna walk it.
I would think it would be better to do it with planning because,
Yeah.
I mean, ZBA, we got bumped a month already, and that may take another 2 months, and then planning, I mean, you guys may walk and then have the planning board come in front of you 3 months from now and say, okay, what are your comments, and it might be better to all do it at once, I would say.
Yeah, I'd rather just piggyback onto whatever the planning board suggests.
Okay.
I mean, I think we've all seen it enough, that's
Yeah,
sure.
you guys have walked this, right?
Walked it a lot, so, I don't, if anyone has any objection to that.
I think that's perfect idea.
Well, I think it should be seen with the new wetland delineations in place,
Right.
and not assume that just because we walked it in the past that, and not all of us have been there. What is it before ZBA for? What's the,
It is in front of the ZBA for the gravel operation in a residence 1 district, which is right here, which we had a few parts in it. And then the second one is for the special exception in agricultural. So even though the excavation, it says it's allowed in its own section, we felt that it did for the other sections.
2 sections conflict each other.
Very typical in New Hampshire, needless to say. Unfortunately, it cost us about 60 days of meetings.
Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay, thank you, we'll see you again.
Does he want this back?
Do you want these back?
No, those are mine too.
Oh, I drew on mine, sorry.
Everything on your desk came from me. I have it in the planning office.
All right. Okay, up next, discussion with regards to Fournier Revocable Trust regarding map 7 lot 82 regarding landscaping business site plan on Patty Hill Road. I hope everybody took their packet and opened it instead of just 5 minutes before you walked in the door and looked over all this. There's a lot of correspondence going on with this project, and let's see. Who would like to start the fun?
Well, you
I believe
requested
the
it to be back on.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. We requested this to come back because there has been information regarding the questionable status of the wetland, questionable status of whether DES says there's a wetland there or was a wetland filled or not, and the appearance of soil and water testing for salt. I felt like there were parameters that we needed to discuss and perhaps give comment to planning board from what we see as what's going on this site. So since we do, I guess it's fair to start off with the applicant. Would you like to introduce the project and comment on any of what's been going on within the past month? Mr. Shower, maybe, or the...
For the record, my name is Peter Shower. What was the role of salt?
Can we address the wetland issue first? Can you just tell us what the status is with that? And I'm kind of, my apologies, I'm leafing through this pile looking for what we have. We have a note from Dr. Vanderpool. We have environmental studies from Shower Environmental. We have soil and water tests from Shower Environmental. So.
And that too.
And this too, okay.
You got a new one passed out tonight that I sent to you, Kimberly. Which
Okay.
is not, it's from New Hampshire Spring Environmental.
Okay. Okay. So. There's also the pin board down there. Sure.
Do you see growing up on it? I think we've already been over the soil testing status once before. Do you want me to?
You
go
discussed
over-
that at the planning board meeting.
And I discussed it at the Conservation Commission also,
We didn't receive the soil and water test before.
the soil water test, but I mean the soil testing that was done
Oh.
in the test pits
Yes, yes.
and the wetlands. We did
Yes.
that once before.
Yes, I guess the gist of it is
I can
you
tell
guys
what-
dug test pits and did some investigation and identified and proposed that there wasn't wetland fill, and DES, last meeting, we received a letter from DES saying that they, I have that letter in front of me, no, I don't. But basically, we were of the understanding that DES, we read it as, well, DES says that there probably wasn't a wetland there, but planning board reintroduced that concept that the letter really says that they couldn't determine if there was a wetland there. And since we received information from an abutter, questioning this, and it's my understanding that this is still going through peer review at DES, is that correct? That's still going through peer review? So we don't actually have something for us to stand on as far as whether or not this was a historic wetland fill. Is that correct?
I thought at that meeting that Mr. Adams had said that it was going to leave the decision up to the peer review.
At the planning board meeting last week?
No, he said that at the
Is that correct?
Conservation Commission meeting.
Yeah, let me preface this by making a statement, okay?
Sure.
Now, I've explained this to the Board of Selectmen, I've explained it to the Planning Board, and I'll explain it to this commission. I implemented a very strict policy in the Wetlands Bureau that says that no member of the Wetlands Bureau staff will be directly involved with a decision-making in the community in which they reside, whether it be a decision on whether to issue or deny a permit, or whether it be a decision relative to an enforcement action. And that holds true here, so I am not involved with that. However, that having been said, I'll make this general comment because it applies to these types of situations and not necessarily to this specific piece of property. But as in any case, when there is an accusation made, the burden of proof rests with the person or the party that makes the accusation.
Right.
And they have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that a violation had occurred. It's a pretty high bar to clear, to be perfectly honest with you. So I'll just say that in general, and that's nothing new. I mean, courts use that same standard when they're looking at these sorts of disputes. So, we'll leave it up to the peer review at the Wetlands Bureau and see what comes out of that.
Okay.
And I believe part of why they are called back in is there's the tests done by two different parties that have different test results, and one of them is extremely high.
The chloride.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I
We're
believe
just
that
talking
is
about
the evidence that you brought them back
We're
in
just
to go
talking about the
over.
wetland fill issue now here,
Right.
not the chloride issue.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So the status then is that we're going to let DES decide through the peer review whether or not there has been the historic wetland fill. So the issue was then introduced that there was the potential of an off-site or an impact to a butter property or the town wetlands, and as such, soil tests and salt tests were done. And last month's meeting, I believe we had the questionable, we had the initial water test from Mr. Gibson. And because there was the question as to whether or not how that was conducted, how those samples were collected, we recommended to planning that there be independent samples taken, and so that process has occurred. And so the applicant had water and soil tests taken, and the abutter, Mr. Gibson, had soil and water tests taken, and we've received them now, and from last week's planning board meeting, we all got a chance to take a look at them, and there is a discrepancy between the two of them, or between the two sets. Not in all cases, and do we have?
I can go over that if you'd like.
If you'd like to,
Yeah.
sure.
Sure, just very briefly.
We have Brian's handy dandy chart.
I wish we did have his slide.
Brian's handy dandy slide.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was a good tool.
Go ahead, you can talk.
Sure. I don't have the abutters information, so I guess I'll have to let them do that
all right.
themselves. And it was in the slides, so I made it nice just so I could compare it, but I don't have that information.
Yeah.
What we did was, after that Conservation Commission or Planning Board meeting, I don't know which it was, I get confused now which meeting I'm at. But anyway, Mr. Gibson and I, and Mr. Gibson's representative, Thomas Carr from Meridian Land Services, and a representative from Eastern Analytical, I think that was all of us, met on site and decided where we would sample for salt, sodium, and chloride. And we sampled in 4 different locations. Well, it was 4 different soil samples and 1 water sample. The soil samples were taken, there's a driveway that comes into Mr. McAleary's house in the back. I think you must have walked that when we did a Conservation Commission walk. There's a culvert under that driveway. We sampled right at the outlet of that culvert in the soil. And we both took samples from the same test hole so that hopefully we get consistent results. We also took soil samples at the end of the outlet pipe that comes under Mr. Fournier's excavation area or fill area. There's a plastic PVC pipe that drains water. And we took samples right at the end of that. We took 2 samples there, one at 0 to 2 inches and one at 6 to 7 inches deep. And then we took another sample. We followed those wetlands down approximately 100 feet into Mr. Gibson's property, and we took a soil sample in the wetland where the 2 streams converge and it becomes a wetland system. We also, at that location on the Mr. Gibson property, we dug a hole let it equilibrate with water and took a water sample at that same location. Now, the test results for the chloride on the four different sites, the chloride levels on Mr. McAlery's culvert was 10. At the Fournier outlet, it was 120. Do you have, it's
I'm looking through it
on
right now.
page 2 of
Yep.
the analytical
Two,
report.
Yep.
If you could follow along with that. You got it.
Already have the packet from Shower.
And you see it says,
Big one.
yeah, see it says chloride. At the outlet of the culvert on Mr. Fournier's property is 120. 6 to 7 inches deep, it was 50. And in Mr. Gibson's wetland, it was 150 in the soil samples. Those are all soil samples, okay? If you look down at the bottom of the page, toward the bottom of the page, is a chloride sample that says 170. That is the water sample, the chloride level in the water samples. Now, it's important to realize that the maximum contaminant level for the state of New Hampshire is 250 milligrams per liter. And that's
For drinking water.
That's for drinking water. That's absolutely correct. There is no standard for soil that I can find, a maximum contaminant level. So you can see even our soil samples on the Fournier property, the McAlery property, and the Gibson property met even the drinking water standards. Now, they don't have to, because fluoride levels in soils can range very high. If you turn the page to page 3, you'll see the same test results for sodium in the same locations. McAlery culvert was 110. Fournier outlet was 260 at the surface and 180, 6 to 7 inches deep. And in the Gibson wetland, it was 460 parts per million, or milligrams per kilogram. Look down at the bottom of the page, the water sample for sodium was 150, which is still below the maximum contaminant levels. Basically, that was our results. Now, their results corresponded very closely to ours, except for the one sample in the Gibson wetland. The soil sample showed up at, I think, 1,660 milligrams per kilogram, which is the same as parts per million. Why? I don't know. It's the same sample site. We were doing this out of the same test hole. So, I can't explain it. I just do not know why. We think our value is obviously correct. I don't know.
I guess when I look at these samples, you're right, there are no soil standards. I guess what I see, I mean, when you look at the chloride and you go from the northern abutter, which of 10, to the Fournier culvert, 120, Fournier culvert 50, Gibson wetland 150, Gibson in-stream 170. I mean, the difference between 150 and 10 is a lot. And so I don't think there can be an argument made really that there wasn't some type of impact from this salt storage. And I guess that's what I'm struggling with is we haven't, I guess the problem is that no one seems to agree on whether there's been I won't say impact, effect, and can we attribute it to the salt storage on site, and if so, what is the next step? And so that's what I wanted us to just throw it all out on the table and discuss. Collis.
Well, I've thought about this long and hard, so I'm going to give you what my opinion is about this salt issue.
Yes.
I think it's our job as a planning board, as a conservation commission, as a municipality, to make sure, what we're doing is approving a site plan, is to make sure that the site plan that we approve adequately addresses salt storage. Okay, that's what we're doing. That's our job. And so that when we approve that, when the property owner goes to execute the site plan and build the site, it gets built accordingly so that this salt issue is addressed. Now, what happened in the past, to be perfectly honest with you, is a civil matter between them. We can't prove this. I mean, these tests are great, but I don't care about it. A court may care about it. If one property owner feels as though they've been harmed by the activities of another property owner, they've got recourse, and that recourse is through the courts. And that's where they present this information and let the courts decide
I guess,
whether or not. I mean, that's not up to us.
I guess my feeling is, I mean, the wetland is our resource. I mean, don't we have a role in saying this happened and now we know it happened? And what is the town's role?
I'll give you my opinion. The town's role is to make sure that the site plan we approve addresses salt storage.
Well,
If there's a claim by one party that another party has done them harm because their failure to adequately deal with salt on the property, that's a civil matter in my opinion.
so, but we're
We
saying,
don't have the expertise, the planning board doesn't have the expertise, we've got conflicting information.
well, I guess,
There's no way we can get to the bottom of this, in my opinion.
so what we're saying is, I guess I just feel like this is a town resource that someone has impacted with inadequate salt storage. So
That's a claim.
that's a
claim.
question, yes.
That's an allegation.
And we don't know that for a fact.
That's right.
You're right. And I get the sense that the town doesn't want to, I guess I'm just a little frustrated that there's no recourse. Even if, okay, so this applicant didn't come in, so we knew Mr. Fournier, so if Mr. Gibson called me 5 years ago and said, hey, do you know we've got a salt storage shed that, and then we've got salt values in our wetland, and now what? Or say Joe Schmo down the street keeps a pile of salt, and they're letting it impact or potentially affect our town wetlands. Are we in the position to say we're not going to do anything about that?
I think the town can. I think the town has lots of options available to it, including seeking a restraining order from the courts to stop whatever's going on.
Well, but that's the question, Cos. I mean, that we're the Conservation Commission, and no one has so far made any comment that the town should make movement on this or suggest anything. And I guess I'm not sure the process. And maybe the decision is that we don't have a role in this. But I just feel like we have the potential. I mean, we're not going to, you're right, we can't say this happened. But we can say there is a potential impact to our town resources from someone who stored salt on their property.
You can say that? We can say that right now?
We have a question. We have information in front of us that says maybe they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so does the town want to come to get to an answer to this? Or does the town want to say, well, we don't know the answer, so we're going to pretend this doesn't, we're going to ignore it? I mean, there has to be an answer. There has to be either maybe they did or maybe they didn't. But it seems to me the feeling I get is
There can't be any maybes.
well,
They either did or they didn't.
but that's the question. There is no answer at this point, and I guess I felt like we needed to discuss it to say, my feeling is we should recommend to the planning board that we have a third party investigate this. But I understand that the town is very concerned about whether or not we have a role in this. And my feeling is that we do. And I wanted to discuss it as a commission to see. I understand your point. I understand exactly this is kind of outside of the planning board's application and they're moving forward with doing the right thing. Got it. Great. I brought this up before. Let me give you another example. We've got the trash dump that David found during the aerials. We've got, diesel or whatever potential impact that from all the storage of all of the stuff that he has. Now, the town knows that the man was storing all of this stuff and that we know that our prime wetland is like 50 feet, away from all the stuff that he stored. Are we going to ask them to do soil investigations? We have data in front of us. I guess the frustration is that we're just sort of ignoring it all. And what do we do with this now? Speak. Jean.
I agree. I think a third party should come in.
I mean, just the question, the fact that it's a maybe means, well, maybe we need to find resolution.
And what are we going to do with the third-party information? Consider it gospel?
Well, how
I'm
can
asking
we-
questions. I mean, this is going to get nasty. And
Yes,
tangled up.
I agree with you. And I agree with you. This is quite a civil matter that maybe I understand, Nick, the town is very hesitant to weigh into this foray, except for the fact that I know the town is very nervous about the legal implications of this issue, except for the fact that what we're saying is you can potentially impact our wetland resources, and we're not going to even answer whether or not it happened. That's the question.
Say that.
Well, but what are you saying then? Nick? No, go ahead.
I'm done. I'm done.
Just looking at this and reading this and hearing what Collis said, if an individual was storing XYZ chemical or material and we found XYZ chemical or material in the wetlands, it would be a fairly easy investigation to point to a source. In reading the material, there seems to be a huge number of sources, from farming, fertilization, pig farming, driveway salting, numbers of different causes that can elevate salt. I think as Collis pointed out, we know that there is a level which is fairly consistent other than that one water source that's present. None exceed state levels. But I think, as Collis mentioned, there is a site plan in front of you, and the site plan proposes to mitigate that.
Now, that's an interesting word, because I don't see that happening.
I'm
What
not
I
talking
see is
what's
going
in
forward. I don't see remediation.
I'm not talking remediation in the soils, because no one can prove at this point,
Right.
or point to the one source that caused it, whether it's historical, whether it is from the salt. But as Collis mentioned, if you make it a point that in going forward, whatever plan is finally approved assures that no salt storage would contribute to any salts leaching into the ground. That's, I think, the job that you're being asked to perform here.
All right.
All right, well, I'd like to restate it somewhat similar to what both have said, but somewhat different in a way too. So first of all, whether there's evidence in front of us or not, I mean, it seems even more speculative to state that, well, it may have been to some pig farming in the past or whatever. Fact of the matter is, there's salt storage there. You can see a gradient. This isn't this isn't the kind of stuff that I would submit to a scientific journal and expect to be accepted as, a wonderful study. But the fact is, there are two sets of numbers, both of which show a gradient, the same gradient, so it's highly suggestive that, in fact, the sodium and the chloride are elevated as a result of the salt storage. Now, the next question is, are they elevated to the point where substantial damage has been done? And the numbers for most of these values that we're looking at are below the state-defined limit of 250. And the answer would appear to be no. There is the higher sodium values, which both sets of numbers show. However, because it's the soil for which there aren't good standards, there's really not a sufficient level of evidence, I would think, that you could say substantial damage has been done. That would require, soil excavation or that sort of remediation or whatever. Whether that's even appropriate for us to make that comment on or not, I don't know. This is just my opinion of looking at it. However, it does strongly suggest that there is an input from that salt storage shed. And as was stated, the plan before is to look at that to see whether it's being properly addressed in the plan. And I would say, okay, but I would like to see some evidence on addressing that more. We're saying, well, it's going to be remedied because there's going to be a concrete slab and so on, but I'd like to see more evidence on that to be sure that that proposed remediation, in fact, will be good enough.
Okay. Amy?
I was not in attendance at last month's meeting. Was this addressed at that point with regards to the possibility of diesel, hydrocarbons, other things of that nature that may have impacted the groundwater?
That actually hasn't come up, no.
So that hasn't been analyzed
It
for?
hasn't been
or-
tested for, no. No. I don't know that there's any, nothing came out of that sort of thing, so.
I mean, can I add something else? I mean, if we're truly concerned about the resources of the town, as you're saying, and we should, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't consider those, but if that's our concern, we ought to be looking at the bigger picture. Like, for instance, Goffstown's DPW policy of black pavement, because the amount of salt that the town puts on the roads in our town is unbelievable. And if we're concerned about salt contaminating our aquatic resources, we ought to be looking at the bigger picture, not one little tiny site here in this particular instance. I mean, this is the one that's before us, but, you know, again, I'm looking at the bigger picture. If our concern is about our wetland and aquatic resources and how salt application affects those, we've got a much bigger issue to deal with in town.
Kim?
There is, and I did read everything.
Kim reads everything.
I do my homework, I read every single thing that comes through, I highlight everything. There's so much contradictory material between one and the other. My big thing is I'm waiting to see what the final outcome is, and then from there can make a better decision of where to go. I do believe partly what Carla says too, that okay, how do we go forward that it won't contaminate anymore? And my other thought would be too that for a certain time period after when the dust settles from this, that, you know, do we make it that the Fournier property do a mandatory every 6-month, 1-year testing of these test pits for follow-up, to see, okay, now we're starting from a clean slate, brand new salt shed, okay, we have to do once a year mandatory that they have to pay for, and designated areas that everyone's happy with to test the salt. And then again, we can see if there's been any changes. So that was my thought down the road, but until I hear from Concord what the final outcome is, that's all that I really feel comfortable saying.
Well, I think at this point Concord's not weighing in on the salt levels.
Well,
Concord's
I mean
discussing the wetland.
The wetland, that's what I meant.
And I would agree with Kim. I think it's totally appropriate to recommend to the planning board that a monitoring plan be put in place to make sure that, you know, what they're saying will work the way they say it's going
See,
to.
that's why I want to talk about this. None of this has come forward, and I felt like we needed to have a discussion about what all of this means. So, like, that is a reasonable expectation to suggest to that planning suggests that there be a monitoring plan for future. You know, so I know poor Mr. Vanderpool over there. He's just waiting. So you are welcome to. They've asked us though to come to the mic to talk. So the crowd gets too noisy, so they turn your mics off.
Rick Vanderpool, Ecosystem Management Consultants. Just, if you don't mind, I'll start back at the wetlands issue. Just a piece of information might be useful. I spoke with Linda Magoon today, who's reviewing the materials. She said she would try and get it done by the end of today, but wasn't hopeful given that she was on vacation last week. She is not going to visit the site. She's going to weigh the information that's provided to her from all parties and then come to a determination. I've submitted my materials, my comments, so I'm not going to say anything more about it. And I think you're wise to use that as the sort of final word on that one. But relative to the chlorides and salt levels, I think Dave sort of hit the nail on the head by saying that, first off, the planning board ordered the tests. They ordered a third-party so-called review. They prescribed a method by which impartial judges, through a double-blind test, would come up with data that they could then use to make a determination. It's the planning board that gave rise to that. So it's really not the Conservation Commission's job, I believe, to make a determination on that level. That said, being a Conservation Commission member for 3 decades, I also believe that the Conservation Commission's responsibility is to protect the resources of the town. So states in RSA 36A, that is what the body is formed to commit itself to. When I see chloride levels that are 25 times the base level for state water bodies, statewide, and this is from New Hampshire Rural Lakes Association, published, I think I cited that in my document, and that's just, that can be easily gotten online, but that's one published piece of that information. And sodium levels that are 100 to 300 times the base level. There is cause for concern. After having done a watershed study for chlorides and sodium in the Waukegan watershed for 2 years, working with Plymouth State Testing Lab, and coming up with even 45 to 100 parts per million, or whatever. That was enough for us to trigger some concern for a public drinking water supply. Now, I admit this is a private, and I think Carl's point about the town spreading salt is certainly a worthy one, but I really don't think that's an issue here. This is a private, a butter situation. I agree it's a civil case. That said, I don't think it absolves the commission of the obligation to make a recommendation to the planning board. That is to say, if they have initiated this sort of double-blind test to come up with data, and the data that they have recommended, which both the applicant and the abutter agree to, the numbers speak for themselves. Admittedly, they're not completely in line with one another, but as Brian indicated with his chart, most of them are the same, except for that one sodium level from 400 and some odd to 1660. Most of them are the same, and there's enough, in my opinion as a scientist, having done a lot of water quality testing, there's enough of a concern that the Conservation Commission should really voice that concern to the planning board and agree that, in fact, the findings suggest that, at the very least, monitoring should be done. But what my client is certainly trying to push for is that some remediation is done. He's the one that's drinking the water, or potentially drinking the water, or using the water that's now at 400 and some odd parts per million, which is way above the 250. And if his test is looked at as accurate, which I don't see why it shouldn't be, it's 1,660 parts per million. That's even further above. So there is a concern. Would you want to drink water out of your well that has that high a level of sodium? I have done so. When I lived in Fitzwilliam Depot, we had the state, with its road salt, contaminate our well. The state dug a new well for our house. Okay, that is what they will do. At least they did then. Point is that there is, I believe, a good case for remediation to be done by Mr. Fournier, based on the probability, the very high degree of probability, especially when it was bracketed upstream and finding 89, and going downstream and finding 460 and 1660. That is, I mean, how much more testing do we want to do, and how much more do we want to place on the abutters, sort of financial burden of proof, when he is actually the aggrieved party, and the town, both in the commission and the planning board, particularly the planning board, has not called for any redress. I mean, this is unbelievable. Yes, it's a civil matter, but the fact that the town can say, okay, we're going to order you to do these tests, you're going to pay for them, which Mr. Gibson did, and then get the results and say, well, gee, isn't that interesting? They're not exactly alike. And not order any redress or any remediation. That's unbelievable to me. And I would suggest that the town would be remiss in overlooking that, and should, both from the commission's concern about the protection of the natural resources, and from the planning board's concern about activities that were done without a permit, unauthorized activities that have an impact on the abutter side, I would hope that the town addresses that forthrightly. Thank you very much.
Hang on. Nick, did
Just
you?
a clarification, because Dr. Vanderpool talked about the well that was replaced. Are these samples from Mr. Gibson's drinking water?
There was an initial sample from a drinking water well on the property. Most of the sample that had the 460, 1660 was actually from soil from his property. And I might suggest that that's actually worse, in my opinion.
So do we have any test samples from the drinking water?
We don't.
Well, there was an unauthorized former test that came up with chloride and sodium levels from his well that indicated elevated levels, which gave cause for concern initially to go ahead and go through this testing protocol. And that's what I was referring to. So.
And what were those levels?
Hang on. Rick, go ahead. What, David?
The well levels that were taken before, I'd like them to be repeated.
It was 420, but that was when.
The 420 level was actually taken from the groundwater discharging from his property.
Oh, okay, so
Okay,
it
so
wasn't
that
your
was-
drinking well.
Right. I actually do have an elevated level in my drinking water though, too, it's 50. So,
But we don't know that for a fact, because
Right,
that's,
no, and that's-
drinking water is kind of out of our
Isn't there
purview.
both a dug well and an
We're not talking about
artesian
drinking
well on
water.
the
We're
property?
talking about illegal activity that contaminated my property,
Isn't there,
and the illegal activity that continued.
Okay, Dean.
isn't there both a dug well and an artesian well on the property?
Yes, there is.
So which sample was,
I took it out of the dug well.
is that where you draw your drinking water from?
They both are connected to my house.
How close
I
is that?
That's
drink
where you
the
draw your
artesian-
drinking
Oh,
water.
okay.
I drink out of the artesian well now,
They
they're
drink
both
out of the
connected to my house.
Okay.
Any other questions? Or none, all, unless,
No, Mr. Shower?
It's how close is that well to the road? Would that contamination be coming from the road?
The well, the well is 100 feet further downstream in the wetlands than we were. It's 230 feet from his illegal fuel storage shed.
How far is it from the road, Dean?
How far is it from the road?
How far is your well from the road?
600 feet.
Okay.
Yes, it's proven and documented in the literature that I gave you, that salt moves over 600 feet. It moves many meters, hundreds of meters. And I think what Paula said hit the nail right on the head. The road salt coming off these roads is much more contaminable than what we're talking about on this property. Not to say that this isn't a problem, I'm not saying that. But, and Mr. Fournier would agree to some sort of monitoring system. But I think we need to move ahead, get this problem solved so that we can correct the problem. There's no sense in keeping going back and forth on this issue when the problem still exists on site.
Well, what,
We need to get to a point.
what has Mr. Fournier,
We will agree to an annual monitoring of the soil after the new salt shed is in place. And we will submit those documents to the town. We'll sample the outlet sample, the same place that we sampled the pipe for, on Mr. Fournier's property.
That, I
Just
thought
to
that
make-
outlet pipe was gonna cease to exist.
just
Just
Dean,
to make
come on.
sure, we'll sample right on his property line and make sure there's no contamination coming onto Mr. Gibson's property. Or increased. And we'll set up a monitoring program.
Well, we haven't heard that until tonight.
We haven't had to propose it to tonight. We don't
That's why
feel
we're
that
off
there
here.
is a problem. And that's our stand. We're still below the drinking water standards. Even though they're elevated, we're still below the drinking water standards. Salt is not a toxic element.
And as a certified wetland scientist, how do you rebut Dr. Vanderpool's statements of the fact that these salt levels are elevated for a wetland?
Salt levels in wetlands will shock you. Go on the other side of the road from Mr. Fournier's and sample the salt in that wetland that comes off the road from the state highway. It will shock you, I can assure you of that. And it'll be much higher than the 460 that we found in Mr. Gibson's wetland.
Which is twice the acceptable limit.
Dean,
You keep saying it's
come
low,
on,
but it's
Dean.
not.
There
Come on,
is no
Dean.
acceptable limit in soil.
250, I
Let me
was told
say,
by
let me
the
tell
state.
you.
David.
One is two wrongs, make a right.
I would just
Hey,
like, I
hang
would
on.
just like to make the point and hope that we can stop throwing in other comparisons. We're not talking about, yes, road salt pollution is a serious problem. That's not what we're talking about right now, and I think to continually keep introducing this is just a red herring. We need to look at what's before us and consider that and forget about how bad it may be somewhere else.
Well, except that, we don't know what the contribution from the Fournier property is and what the contribution from the state highway is. That's the point I'm trying to make. So we've got
Well-
elevated salt levels.
And,
Where is the
and
contribution coming from and in what ratio?
so it was purposely done to send two groups out there to take samples along the gradient. Both of samples show an increase along the gradient. They show different elevated levels at the end of the gradient, but they show the same trend. So far, that's the only real evidence in front of us. There may be a road contribution, Collis. I haven't seen anybody showing me a gradient from the road to this site. So that's very speculative.
Planning board didn't ask for it, so.
We have, that's right, they didn't ask for it. We have the data that's before us,
That's right.
and to introduce speculative what ifs, what if it was a hog farm, what if it was a road, what if whatever, to me just isn't in the same category as real data.
All right, so I introduced this discussion for us to have an opportunity to make recommendations to the planning board regarding this new information. Let's try to think about what we want to recommend to the planning board regarding this. Mr. Shower has suggested, and I assume Mr. Fournier is in agreement, that there would be a future monitoring plan in place to monitor future potential effects of salt. I
think that we should have the opportunity to review that monitoring.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, we'd like to review that monitoring plan.
And state, like, is it 1 year and then it's forgotten, or should we say that
That'll
it'll,
be part of the plan they present to us, and we'll
Sounds good.
comment on the plan. when
how
it's-
long?
And at what level does it trigger some kind of reaction?
That'll be part of the plan as well.
Yes,
Should
that
be
is a
part of
good
the plan.
question.
Well, it should be part of the plan.
Well, that seems to be in question now. I mean, we seem to have disagreement over what these numbers mean. I would agree with David that they mean something. And I think that Dr. Vanderpool's question of remediation is something we have to, I don't know, think about.
Well, I guess I'd like some sort of idea on what remediation would entail.
Well,
Talking pump and treat? I mean, what are we talking
well,
here?
you know, that's
Excavation?
that's where we get out of, again, our purview or our understanding. And so my initial suggestion at the beginning of this, and I know we've asked for a lot, is to get an idea. What does remediation mean? If the applicant came in and said, listen, we're gonna propose a remediation plan XYZ, it'd be nice to have something to see. I don't have enough knowledge of this information to say we're gonna make you remediate doing this or that. I would suggest that, I don't know, communication with someone who knows these things. I mean, we have two professionals in front of us tonight disagreeing over these sort of issues. So I don't know how to make a decision. Town legal's gonna love me throwing this back at him. Nick?
I guess my question is, when you say remediate, you're referring to removing soil?
Potentially.
Okay, and I guess that's where I would think, I know you said you don't want to compare things, but how do you, let's assume it came from the salt pile, and we have these levels. We would require soil removal and for 170 parts per million, 240 parts per million in the soil, where across the street we could have 10 times those levels from our state and highway.
But we don't have any way of resolving that issue. We do have the potential to resolve
But I guess
this
I mean, right, the decision has to be at what level do you, let's assume the salt shed went away, or it was designed in such a way that there would never be any more leaching. Has it reached a level that you have to remove soil and go from that?
And I haven't seen any conclusive evidence that that in fact is the case. There seems to be an elevation there, but there's also all sorts of conflicting testimony and evidence about what does it really mean. There's nothing I've seen that says that soil has to be ripped out.
And I guess that's my question. It's pretty simple. Is what does remediation mean? I mean, when that word's been thrown out there and it's suggested that remediation is prudent, what does that mean?
Why don't we get a third party?
Dr. Vanderbilt, you.
Just a word. I mean, the only remediation that I've been involved with was removal of the soil and aerating it and treating it with actually compost to allow for anaerobic and aerobic bacteria to decompose the compounds and allow for positive soil testing thereafter. But the only way really to do that is to, I think, increase the refinement of the test. I mean, it would be unthinkable to have Mr. Fournier remove the entire pile of fill if 5% of it had chlorides and sodium. So if remediation becomes a serious argument here, or a serious point, then in fact, I believe further testing of the contaminant levels in the fill pile would be required.
Yes. You'll need to state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Kevin Baum. I'm Mr. Fournier's attorney. I just want to clarify, I mean, you stated that the commission stated that it doesn't know what level is appropriate to remediate. Well, I mean, the State Department of Environmental Services is the appropriate group to make that decision and has. There are action levels, and Mr. Fournier's property and all of the samples that have been taken are below those actionable levels. There's no soil.
Drinking water.
And there is no soil standards. And I just want to keep that in mind here. This is, you're talking about major remediation for something that is below all state standards, existing state standards. I also just want to clarify, because it hasn't been discussed tonight, that there is an action that's being taken, and that's the proposal to move the salt shed, to put a concrete floor under it, to extend that floor out beyond the salt sheds to where any trucks would be loading, unloading. And we said, which hasn't been said tonight, but was said before the planning board, that there was a DES guidance that is on the record that lays out best management practices for salt sheds.
It's in our packet.
And that Mr. Fournier has agreed to meet those best management practices.
Mr. Fournier.
I met with my architect today, and he took the best management practice and brought it back to his office, and he's designing the salt shed in accordance with those standards. So that will be at the planning board meeting, and if you guys want a copy of it, it's going to show everything that's going to be done, including sealing the concrete, so on and so forth, that it recommends.
Okay.
Don't you think that might have been thought of 5 years ago?
Can I get your name for the record?
John Knockley, I'm in a butter.
Yep.
Don't you think some of this should have been thought about 5 years ago when the building was put up illegally and has been leaching for 5 years?
That's outside of our, that's a code enforcement issue that's painfully outside of our purview. Dean?
Mr. Attorney, Mr. Baum made the statement that none of these levels exceed the drinking water standards, but in fact, the original chloride level that I took from the groundwater discharge underneath, coming out from underneath this property, that goes down to 10 or 11 feet of soil before it comes out, is 420, and that's above the standard. And the state hasn't said that they're not going to have any action on this thing. They're waiting to see whether the planning board eliminates that salt shed. That's the indication that was made to me by Rob Livingston and Mitch Lockett.
We actually, don't we have correspondence in here
That they're
from
going to
DES?
wait and see what happens, because
Yes.
the state doesn't want to spend state dollars to
Yes.
enforce it if the town is actually going to eliminate that shed.
Right,
That's what, and that Rob Livingston only said anything.
right. And the state, the state's looking at groundwater. Right.
And it says right on that sheet,
Yep.
the second paragraph down, that the discharge should not have to be treated, the groundwater should not have to be treated to be drinkable.
Well, in cases where a salt storage facility has impacted groundwater and drinking water, DES has acted to eliminate the impact. So, DES said eliminate the impact. Doesn't say remediation. It says eliminate. Monitoring. Okay, in some instances where an improved, but there's still concern that the groundwater or surface water will be contaminated, reasonable to require intermittent surface water and or shallow groundwater monitoring. This monitoring is used to verify the quality of groundwater and associated runoff. BMP, including monitoring, can be required as proactive methods to protect groundwater and surface water in the planning process and during operations. Okay. And then it says DES will hold on any action pertaining to the site until the town has completed its review and made its decision concerning approval.
I don't understand what that means, to be honest with you. It says eliminate the impact. The impact's already occurred. What does that mean, eliminate the impact?
I think it means eliminate the salt
The
storage.
source.
Right.
Because the comment was they were waiting to see if the town was eliminating it before they would consider it.
Yeah, it does say removing the source and ceasing operations.
Yes, which I believe has happened, right? The operations of salt storage has ceased. use at this point, yes.
The state also knows that too. That's why they're also taking a step back from this too. They know there's a stop use order on that shed.
Okay, all right, so, what has been suggested and verbally agreed to is that we propose to follow the BMPs, including a potential, monitoring plan, and that we'd like to review the monitoring plan. I'm open to other suggestions. I feel like I'm trying to flesh this out as much as I can and, doing all the talking. Dr. Vanderpool, you're not doing it.
You also mentioned that, as Mr. Gibson indicated, that there should be a sort of a target level, whether it's the 250 and you know, as a solute in groundwater or surface water, there should be a target level at which either operation cease or some type of remediation.
Right, and as Kyle's pointed out, that should be a part of the BMP and monitoring plan that we'd like to review. So, what that level is and the argument for it, we'd like to see.
You meet in August?
Yes, we are probably meeting in August. Yeah.
And I think the first paragraph on page 2 of the DES letter talks about that. I don't think they look at a target. They talk about the accrued water quality data is used to identify trends. We could set a target at X, but you wouldn't necessarily have to wait until that level met X. You would look at the accumulated monitoring data, and you could actually, if you saw a trend of those levels going up, you shouldn't wait till the target. You would then try to identify the source that's causing those levels to go up over that period of time.
Okay. Yes, I agree with you. I feel like we've already identified a trend here, but the applicant seems to disagree, so. But I guess, you know, we have legal restrictions and we have, you know, data accuracy restrictions. And so it's helpful for DES to give us guidelines to say, this is where they would see this going. And I keep talking and if no one else anyone else has anything else to say about what we're trying to make recommendations to the planning board.
I think we have pretty much general agreement on the issue of the salt.
Okay.
And the monitoring program and all that.
Okay.
Back to the original issue on whether the wetland was filled. Initially, our position was, well, we wanted to see what the state DES had to say. That was our deferral to a third party. A determination was made. However, that was challenged based on some of the data, based on the depth to which they had studied, and so now that challenge is being reviewed at the state. So I think we're still in that position where we're awaiting the opinion of third-party expertise. In this case, it's the peer review being done.
Yes. So I think
So
at this point,
we should make some sort of comment to that effect back to the planning board that we're sort of reserving judgment on the fill issue based on the peer review being conducted at DES.
yes.
I have one question. Does it matter what time of year these levels are tested? Because it's the summertime, and is it going to be different in January? I'm just curious.
Mr. Fournier?
All the studies I read, they said the springtime is the highest time because that's when everything melts and all the salt and stuff is within the snow. That's what I've read.
I would agree with Mr. Fournier on that. There's a lot of biological reasons why that happens. That's one of the rates. So really to get a good sense of the baseline maximum, that should be done in the springtime.
Yes. Well, and I would assume that, you know, a qualified environmental professional could plan a monitoring plan around those variables.
So are we talking about putting in some monitoring wells, and whatever the monitoring system is, I don't want the fox watching the hen house?
Well,
I wanna have the opportunity to test wherever these tests are being done at the
what,
same time.
what we've asked the applicant to do is give us a plan, and we'll review the plan,
But
a
if that's
monitoring
something
plan.
that- The plan, as an abutter, I'd like to be able to.
Well, the plan will be publicly available because it'll be reported back to us. Public record.
Can we do that at the next regularly scheduled conservation meeting?
Sure, if you'd like.
If you have a plan,
Sure, if you have a plan.
plan's prepared by then, yeah.
Sure.
Submit it to us for our
Fourth
reaction.
Wednesday of August.
I'd like to get it in before the September 9th so that they can have, you can have comment to the planning board.
Yeah, the fourth Wednesday of August, whatever that is.
Sorry?
All right, anybody else have any other comment? I think we're gonna wrap this one up.
Well, there's one other document in front of us. Do we want to discuss this and take a position on this?
What is it?
I believe it was a plan that was prepared to demonstrate that a site-specific permit was required. I think that's the purpose of this plan, but I'll have to let whoever presented this speak to it. I don't know who the author of this was.
The abutters submitted this at the planning board meeting, and it was showing an area that they felt was impacted, and a surveyor stamped it. And so,
Oh, is that the 8,000 square
When the
foot?
state went out there and did their aerial, there was no indication, first of all, we asked because of that, they weren't allowed to be, but, they didn't include all the septic area that he had to disturb. They also didn't include all the new driveway that has to go down through the front, all the way to the edge of my property that's gonna be disturbed.
Yes.
And they also didn't include the banking cut that has to be shaved back to allow for site distance. So they came up with whatever it was, 78,000 or some number to that effect, when in fact, when you add all that area in, it comes up over 100,000.
This is, you're questioning whether or not DOT needs it, DES needs an AOT. Yes, and we have no comment on that, that's the DES, that was stated at planning board.
I actually didn't present this.
Okay.
I wasn't at the meeting,
Yeah.
but I was given.
Yeah,
so I wanted to
that's a
have
DES, I mean, you'll have to take that up with DES, that's not our ruling about whether it needs an AOT.
I didn't know that was even gonna be it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Fourth Wednesday in August. Sorry, I don't have a calendar.
I have the 26th, but that might be the Thursday, that's why I'm.
Fourth
Let me
Wednesday.
get your calendar. We were looking at that.
I have one in my phone, take me forever to find it.
Oh, good
The
point.
25th.
The 25th, okay.
25th.
Thank you.
I'm writing the planning date.
All right.
August 25th.
Thank you.
Whew, okay, thank you, everyone. Glad we live in a country where there's no public discussions. Damn it, I lost my- There it is. Okay. Let's move forward. We have a recommendation to ZBA. Jim and Karen Huzak seek a variance to build a porch and above-ground pool within the wetland and surface water conservation district. Map 3, lot 5939, Van Buren Circle. Do we have a map?
Yes, it's with the plan.
It's attached to what I got mailed to you. It's your mailings.
Oh, there we go, Mr. and Mrs. Huzak, there we go. Is it Huzak?
Hi, Zach.
Hi, Zach. Oh, hello, thank you. Good.
Very
I wasn't
upset
sure if you were
about
gonna be here. We could have bumped you up, I'm sorry. State your name for the
Oh,
record.
yeah, I didn't know you were, if you
Jim
were here.
Jim Hizak, alrighty. We have a map, Van Buren. Okay, yes, and
It's on the back.
it was in our mailing packet.
Yeah, no, we had it, I just temporarily lost it. in
Oh,
the
yes,
file.
I know, hidden under all our
Gigantic
stuff.
pile.
Okay.
What does it look like again?
It looks like,
Yeah.
And I think
it
there's a
says from
picture.
Patty Gale.
Breaking into my email.
Okay.
This has
lost
gotta be
mine
the
as
biggest
well.
pile of paper we've ever had.
Hey, I gave you all the information.
Mr. Huzak, is that already a pool right there?
Totally lost.
Yeah, it's already built.
Oh, it's already built.
I
Okay.
totally don't have
It's
it.
already built.
Okay, it's already built, and where is it in oh, we have a sketch on the map, I see.
Yes.
Oh,
Catching up here.
uh,
And, okay, so the pool is 48 feet off the wetland,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yeah.
And the
That
porch,
is, the goals measure plus or minus 48 feet,
I remember you being
from
earlier
the
today.
wetlands, from the scale. They were built, we had a house, we built the deck 11 years ago and closed it about a little over a year ago now.
And
That's what became the porch, the deck
Yeah,
became the
the
porch.
deck we've had there since the beginning. This
do we
house
have any,
11 years old.
do
And 2 weeks later, I built the porch, I built the,
we have
deck.
any topo or anything that shows? I mean, it just says drainage easement. Do we have any idea what this runs to or looks like, or? Can you tell us anything about this wetland drainage easement?
Oh, it's, the neighborhood is, we're on the inside circle of the neighborhood, through the middle of our common land. It's an association. I
Oh, you're off
believe-
Shirley Hill, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe, I mean, I'm speaking from what I understand. I'm not,
Okay.
definitely not. But there's probably just water runoff that runs down into an easement. We're on the low end of the hill.
Okay.
And our lot specifically abuts a drainage easement, which is fairly large.
Okay.
And it abuts our property, comes through the middle of the common land that's, we all own, I guess you would say. And so therefore, we have a setback limit of 50 foot off of the wetlands, which we were not aware of when we did this. We would have taken that into consideration. We've had a deck there for 11 years, and no one's ever said a word to us. And
How did this come about?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I really don't know. That's been something I would like to know, but.
I think the building inspector actually saw it when he was
Oh.
out there inspecting something else, and then realized they didn't have their permit.
And it definitely is a 50-foot setback and not a 100-foot setback?
Correct.
Okay.
I know we are 50 foot short.
Oh, because grandfather maybe or something?
Yeah, this is an older subdivision.
Well, it's built.
We just like to make it all right. We're not doing anything with the town. It's
I don't know what
plus
we
or
can say,
minus
it's built.
2 feet we're talking about, and we spent a substantial amount of money on these projects, which, again, we're not filthy rich, and it would impact us a lot if we had to do anything with them.
I don't have any issues.
Yeah, it's 2 feet, and it's based upon a wetland delineation from how long ago?
Turn
I
into
mean, who knows if that's where the wetland line is anymore? Maybe closer, maybe farther away.
Right, well, I mean, the line was set at the time of subdivision, that's all fine, but it just seems pretty clear that they didn't know, and, I mean, this impact 2 feet is so minimal that it's not even really worth debating.
It's the reasons why lots 3 and 4 should not be on Blackbriar, because people encroach on the wetland buffer. But, having said that.
And I just want to show that I do read everything, and I tried to read all this, and you wrote 3 feet. And not that 2 feet need 3 feet, but I did read it.
That's why she's our treasurer.
I read your whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah. In case you're curious that you actually went through all that work, so.
So would you recommend ZBA granting?
Yeah,
variance?
I guess we have no comments
How do you?
or concerns. Nope.
I would move that we recommend that the waiver be granted.
Okay, well, we can move that with we can vote that the waiver be recommended. Do we need an official vote on that? Oh, David made a motion?
I'll second.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I wish I went first.
Poor you.
If I had known, I would have
Bad
said
TV
to you,
night.
the gentleman here for the Z, rather than sit through all that, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's enlightening, so.
You don't have
Oh,
anything, you don't
yeah.
have anything better
I've
to
been
do.
very educated on the whole process.
Don't put salt on your land.
Always make sure.
Okay.
Know our setback.
All right, let's move forward. Thank you.
very much.
Bye. All right, finance. Madam Financier?
The current use balance right now is $254,157.38. And basically, the changes from interest of $10.40. And presently, or up to this point, our operating budget stands at, we have still a balance of $3,035.28.
Excellent. Okay.
Is now the time to bring this up?
I don't know what it is. Oh, yes, we have been, we received a letter from the Board of Selectmen. Our lovely representative, Mr. Campusano here. We have been asked, department heads and committee chairmen, to reduce our budgets. And
That was a request from the Budget Committee.
yes, request from the Budget Committee.
By
And
5%.
by 5%. I had heard 10%. It says 5%.
It says 5%?
It says the state decreased its contribution by 5%. I had thought there was somewhere that said reduce it by 10%. That's what I heard.
I believe our budget this past year was reduced, wasn't it? Didn't we send
We're
that
the
out?
cheapest committee in town. We don't ask for anything. So we will take this into consideration when we go over our future budgets, and we will work towards making the selectmen happy. Start budget discussions in early September, so Patty will just help us remember. It always seems to sneak up on
Because
us.
we should make sure that the date is October 23rd. So that does.
Budget presentations will be scheduled on Saturday, October
So
23rd.
to make sure we have it all.
I'm sure we'll set a good example for all the other departments.
That's that pumpkin festival.
Because that's the way we are.
That's right. We're
Yeah, we
cheap,
can
man.
tell them we're a year ahead of them, and we already started the process.
That's right, we cut our budget back last year. Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Okay, administration. Oh, letter from the Board of Selectmen. There we go. Copy of email from town administrator asking if conservation is interested in purchasing property. The last I heard was no, and I heard the town isn't interested in buying any new property.
Gladly take it as a donation.
Yeah, for not really any reason.
So I pass on that you would take it as a donation, but you won't, okay.
Are we talking about the lot up on?
Yes,
on the
just
mound.
discuss it, just to make sure we all know.
It does about conservation land, but generally,
Yeah.
you do get those properties from, by donation.
Yeah, this just, if anybody's interested, this is how it lies, and this, you're not gonna be able to see it across the room, but these are conservation lands and different ownerships, including a lot of those lots. There's a little red square here showing the lot in question. It's literally right off the incline railway bed, very steep slope.
And how much, it doesn't really say though, the size of the lot. They're not big. I mean,
Well,
are we talking like half acre, quarter of an acre,
no,
a city
it's-
lot?
It's tiny,
Like a
tiny,
city
tiny.
lot, like the size of this room?
I mean, it's not worth anything. Why should we purchase it?
No, but
Take it
I was
as a
just curious,
donation.
I'm trying to like, how big is this thing? Okay.
Okay.
It's not developable either for any purpose, so.
Open Space Committee, would you like to give us an update? Sure.
Open Space Committee did not meet last month.
Did not meet. Excellent.
Extended vacation will be coming to an end soon.
How soon? I'm just going through all this stuff. What is that? Okay. Minutes. I had corrected the minutes with Patty before. Did anybody review the minutes? Anybody have any edits or changes?
Is the ones that we got, the corrected minutes?
Yes.
Then I've read them, and I agree.
Can't read them. Anyone else have any changes? You want to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept.
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor to accept the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain? Okay, we've got some timber cut permits. I probably have the letters around here somewhere.
Question?
In the correspondence. that
Question?
we blocked.
Yes?
Number one, why are we concerned with a timber cut permit in Bedford?
Oh, I don't know.
It's, no, that's the access comes off of there. Do you know that subdivision that was done years ago that they've now made into like industrial commercial land kind of behind Hebert's?
Yes.
It's that one.
Okay. Okay. Gentle slopes land
Hang
development.
on, I'm catching up. Okay, Terrell Hill Road, yeah, 30,000 board feet.
You know, is that?
Gentle slopes land
The
development.
Janigan, now they already at the top of the hill, they're logging, and we approved that logging and all that good stuff. Is that a separate logging that's being, from
Yes,
this?
this is the one that
On
was
the other
the
side?
proposal.
Okay,
Yeah.
just so I'm getting, because he owns land on both sides, so I wasn't making sure it wasn't, okay,
No, it's a new one.
okay.
I'm confused. I guess it doesn't matter.
Behind the white farmhouse, the property back there.
Yeah.
At the top of the hill.
Gotcha.
Turkey Bell.
Okay.
Where we walked in, when we were looking at the land.
That's where a subdivision was originally
Mhm.
proposed, right? Okay.
Terrell Hill.
Carol.
Terrell Hill.
Depending on what state you're born.
So weird. Yeah, I know. Not confusing me. Okay, whatever. We don't have any issues of concern? You?
Details in front of us anyway.
Oh, well, I do, sorry, I do. It's 30,000 board feet, that's why I was trying to read the map. I just, that's it, I mean, we know where it is, we've asked to just be informed of these things. I don't know if we have any comment to make, it just shows us where it is, and, yep, shows us where it is. They're just gonna log several parcels. There's several parts.
This is gonna be, silly question. Terrell Hill Road in Bedford, like you said, Bedford.
They have one too.
They have one as well.
Okay, that is just throwing me. Okay, because there's two, the Terrell Hills, okay.
Would anyone like to see it? I mean, I do have this lovely packet, if someone would like to review it.
Thank you.
Okay, good, all right, moving on. Oh, and then this is Janigan, map 6, lot 54.
That's the one.
That's the one I was, there's two Terrell Hills. See?
That's why I'm confused.
Oh, I'm sorry, so
Thank
your
you.
original question was referring
Oh,
to one, and
I
that's off 114.
Thank you, that's what I thought, this is up 114, I'm like,
I thought
that's
we
not.
moved on to the
Look at
second
the map.
one.
I thought we were on the second one too.
That's not the turkey farm. Okay, so they're going to do the Terrell Hill Road. Yes.
Janigan.
This is Janigan, yes, thank you. 250, it's nothing. 250 for white pine, 500 pine, 250 cords cordwood. It's pretty minimal. All righty, with this one, oh look, there's a lovely map and everything. That would be the turkey farm, and they don't show where they're going to map it, or log it, they just kind of show it. So, okay. Anyone comments? Okay. All right, correspondence. Forestry notification from DES to Goffstown. Valid, right? Sufficient to start work provided. So the village water precinct is cutting, okay? Hold on. Wow. Copy of email and pictures related to Buckland for 117 and 115 Danis Park Road. Is this a new complaint?
This is from the abutter, and she emailed it to Derek and asked to give to conservation, just for your knowledge, that what she sent to DES. And there's a letter there from them that's not like on letterheads, so it's kind of confusing to us. We asked for it to be on letterhead, stating that they are following up on it and investigating.
Oh, from DES?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, boy, okay. We have had complaints
Just
about
stuff she's seen floating in the water.
Oh. There's microscopic work to verify something was there.
Disregard to that boating
Yes.
Okay.
For your request for a report on the sample that was delivered to the Limnology Center, I've compiled the following. Sample from an alleged discharge, reportedly collected, logged, E. coli, pine pollen, E. coli, less than 9 E. coli per 100 mils. Indicates a clean bacteriological water system. Personnel inspected the site. No wastewater or water quality violations were observed on the site on June 15th, 2010. No discharge pipes were discovered. On the completion of the site visit, it was noted that the Waste Division Spill Response and Complaint Investigation Section will be closing their file on this site. It was noted that Goffstown's EPA has denied his request to operate a business in the residential zone. Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Duly noted.
Why were they checking for E. coli?
I don't know. Well, she submitted them a sample. Mr. Vanderpool, shower.
Yeah, a lot of this you've already went over.
Okay, what's new?
Go up to 9.
To 9.
Well, actually, what's number 8? Postcard for pre-proposals, DESW watershed
8,
grants.
sorry.
Yes.
Want to hear all about grants?
Yes.
The New Hampshire DES Watershed Assistance Section is requesting pre-proposals for the watershed restoration grant for impaired waters and watershed assistant grants for high-quality waters. Pre-proposals will be used to select projects for further discussion and possible funding. You want the card?
So that is for cleaning up water?
It is.
And or protecting.
For
Christine.
Because remember we had the town trying to, was on the ballot, the money for the
Milfoil?
milfoil.
I don't think that would cover.
Would that, because I mean, that was for us to come up, you know what I'm, that's the first thing that came to my mind.
You know anything
Impacted.
about what these are for?
Would the grant be used
Sounds
for
like
that?
there's two separate ones, right?
Yes.
One's
Yeah.
for-
Watershed restoration grants for impaired waters
and then
and
one's for-
watershed assistant grants for high-quality waters. Would anyone like to look into it?
I'd like to see the latter one.
Okay, there you go. And there's also LGC Municipal Volunteer of the Year Awards, if anyone would like to nominate a municipal volunteer. have the information. Town and city, still the last one sitting on my desk. Okay, the source, anyone want to read the source, New Hampshire DES Drinking Water Source Protection Program? Okay,
Yeah, send
what is
that,
this?
yeah.
Oh.
You want that?
Familiar.
Send that as
Can
well.
you pass the source up?
There's a letter from DES for the Goffstown Sewer Stabilization Project, which has been done by my coworker, but I didn't work on it. I don't know. Anybody? We haven't really seen this because it's a dredge and fill for the Goffstown Sewer Stabilization Project. It's basically they're stabilizing the embankment. And the only reason I know about it is because it's kind of sailed around my office a little bit. But we haven't seen this because it's a town project, so we don't really say much about these things. But it's over here at the back of the old landfill, right? Yeah.
On what road?
I don't think it's off of any road. The old landfill.
Laurier Street.
Yeah, Laurier
In
Street.
Pinardville?
In Pinardville.
The soccer fields there.
And the reason for this is they're doing something with the piping and they need to stabilize the slope.
Yeah, as a result of the storms, we had the floods, there was a section of the embankment that sloughed
Jimmed
off,
out.
exposing the sewer intercept pipe.
Okay.
So this is to repair that and stabilize.
Okay. If anybody wants more details on it, we have the copy of the application. So, look how lovely it looks. Okay, what else? Latorno, where's that? Did I miss that? Oh, here it is, 18 Emerald Circle, the shoreline permit. Have we seen this one? Shoreline permit for tax map lot 3693.
Elm Street.
Elm Street, uh-huh. Have we seen this before, Patty? Was this one that came through and?
They're reviewing their permit. I think that's a letter that Derek might have sent telling them they had to go. That you may have gotten a copy of his letter.
No,
But it's saying that they're reviewing the permit.
Okay, no, it's a shoreline application.
Yeah.
Application for a shoreline permit. I don't know anything about this project. 18 Emerald Circle? Anybody know?
I'll have to see if we've gotten it in previously.
Okay. All right.
I'm assuming we must have got it in at the same time as they've done it.
Okay. Moving on, map lot 1947. This is standard dredge and fill. What's 1947? Anybody know? To Carl. This is the town.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. All right. Patty Hill Road. Review of proposed stormwater treatment system. Who reviewed it? New Hampshire Springs Environmental Consultant. Was this a third party brought in?
This is the last letter that you received.
I think that was the individual, they had an expert at the planning board meeting that was talking about the
compacting of the
treatment,
soils and.
retention pond, basically saying he felt that the fill wasn't compacted properly and
He was there,
any treatment.
remember?
Okay. Okay. That was,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. Sorry. All right. Now we have a plan.
Yep. It's in there, and then Viking Orchards, and then another one came in that's not on there.
Okay. Let's look at, this is map 15, lots 160, 168, lot line adjustments. Zone commercial, where's it, off Laurier Street? Oh, yeah. Wasn't this seen last week at planning? Or- yeah.
They did their completeness.
Oh, completeness, yeah.
Is that the only
Yeah.
copy up front?
It is, there's,
It's just a lot line adjustment.
it's a lot line adjustment and there's no wetlands. So I don't know if we have any issues. Anyone want to look at it? Anybody want to discuss it? No?
Is this the one with the trench? No, they were gonna do there was talk on that trench thing?
No, it's different.
Different?
Yeah,
Okay.
not the big trench one, so. There, that's, okay, over there, so.
Good.
All right. Okay. All right. Done with that one. Okay, map 5, lots 102, 103, Viking
Orchards?
They're asking for their time extension, and they want to be approved in phases, is what they're asking to be do. They're at, the way it's approved, but approved in phases, so they have it vested as they're developing it. That's why they're coming in before planning. And they're also working with the homeowners association off of Tyler Drive to manage the water pump station.
It says, please be advised that though the application requests a 90-day extension, this is being submitted as a measure of caution in the event that the Glenview Homeowners Association encounters difficulties when completing its final review. At the date of this letter, which was July 12th, all conditions of approval have been satisfied, with the exception of our delivery of a signed copy to the tri-party agreement and the final Mylar.
You guys know what's going on. Giving you those two. And the same with this is another time extension that expired in 2006, and now they're coming back in to ask for the same approval to be reinstated.
But is this also Viking Orchard?
No, it's a new one that just came in. I was trying to get it to you, because you had the meeting tonight.
Where's Cody Avenue?
Yep.
All right, so before we talk about that, the Viking Orchard, what exactly is it we are supposed to do with this?
I don't think we were supposed to do anything, we just have an opportunity to comment on it.
But the only change is to phase it?
Right.
Yeah, it's just, whenever I get anything in, I let you know what's going on.
Okay, but there's no change to the nature of the plan? It's
No,
just
there's no
all
change
of
to
it
the plan.
phased in?
They just want to be able to build it in phases.
Phasing is a good idea.
Okay, well, that sounds like that's strictly a planning board concern and not really anything for us.
Okay, all right, moving on. So, non-residential site plan, TSL Building Expansion Map 3, lots 32A1 and 3713.
This was approved in 2006, and then this time extension had expired.
I looked this.
I believe the original app, I think Mr. Cody had passed away, and that's what happened, why it stopped. And now this is,
Right, it's off Daniel Plummer. Cody Ave is off Daniel Plummer. Backs up to New Hampshire Route 114.
Yeah.
Not the church.
no, it's in
Next one
addition
down.
to one of the
Yes.
warehouse buildings. He wants
Yeah,
to
yeah.
build the building, same as what was proposed.
I
before.
watched this. Yeah, I don't think we have any resources on it.
And he's going to ask if he can be approved in phases.
Oh, yeah, we should look for it. Yeah, there's nothing here. And this is just an extension.
Yeah, it expired, so he has to
Expired,
come
so
in
he has to
again
come in. Okay.
and ask for his approval to be reinstated.
But the plan hasn't changed.
No, other than he wants to build in phases.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean,
And it's
The
just a
engineering.
building expansion, and there's no wetlands, and there's no,
And he
Yeah.
was going to do it before, and I don't know why he never came back. And
okay,
so we kind of wrote it as inactive.
okay. I don't have any issues with concern. Anybody else? No? Okay. You want the plan?
I think this one too.
I'll take them all. This is stuff like planning's going to see at the August 12th meeting.
Okay, on our agenda is a non-public session. I just want to have a quick non-public discussion.
Yeah.
This is the way I was asked to do this, so
You have to go do a roll call
we'll have
vote.
to do roll call.
Yep, to go into non-public session under RSA 91
Thank you.
A colon 3 Roman numeral number 2.
Okay.
Under C,
C.
adversely affect reputation of someone other than a member of the board.
Help me do a roll call.
Just you go around the room and ask Kelly for, you say.
First, okay.
Would you like to do non-public session?
Is it a yes or a no vote?
Why not?
Sure.
Collis Adams, yes.
I'm a non-voting member.
Okay.
Kim Ricard, yes.
Kimberly Peace, yes.
Amy Polak, yes.
David Neiman, yes.
Jane Walker, yes.
Okay.
So we have to turn off the
Turn off.
Off the TV.